Good morning and a very warm welcome to all the students and their parents and guardians. It's a pleasure to have you here at GITAM University. We have a vision for our university, which some of you may have seen, which is to be an advanced center of learning, which advances on a culture of honesty and compassion, and we attempt to make a difference to the world. Okay? So we welcome you to that vision, and we look forward to interacting and engaging with you in the years to come, at the time that you are on our campus, and even later when you become our alumni. Okay? We take a pretty broad view of what is knowledge. Okay? It is something that happens in a classroom, yes, but a lot of the learning, as you will find, takes place in the student dormitories. A lot of it takes place on the playgrounds, and much of it also takes place in the student clubs and activities. Okay? So we expect that this broad foundation of knowledge, okay, that would be available to you at the university is something that you gain from, and something that helps you make a mark in your life, make good friends through, and try to make memories as well that help you look back later in your life and see that it has really made a difference to your world. Okay? In a sense, knowledge is a form of investment, right? You're going to spend some time here, okay, indulging in all sorts of activities like the ones that I just mentioned, with a view to making some form of skills and some form of broad capacities that enable you to go out into the world and make that difference that we talked about. Okay? But knowledge has also resulted in many new inventions, many new things and products, processes, etc., which have benefited the world, not just personal well-being. Okay? And really, the idea of knowledge is to ensure that people at the end of the day benefit in some way or the other from the end process of that knowledge. Okay? So there have been many inventions, okay, that have benefited all of us. Okay? But in the recent past, some of those inventions, okay, have actually had a market penetration that has been unprecedented in human history. It's never been the case ever. Okay? If you look back the last whatever number of years, 5,000 years even, okay, that some of the inventions have been absorbed by large sections of population. You could guess what I'm referring to. Okay? I'm referring to smartphones, okay, and of course, the quick advent of AI. More than half the world's population uses smartphones. Okay? And I'm sure most of you in the room do so, as well as employ some of the AI that is available, some of those tools that are available to you on those smartphones. Okay? So obviously, if so many people are using it, okay, it seems absurd to even ask a question. Is this useful? Has it benefited people? Right? If a large number of people taking advantage of some invention, must be the case that every one of us is benefiting. But what if we asked the question in a slightly different way? Okay? Supposing I ask, how many of us would wish that this invention had never taken place? When you try to answer it this way, okay, surveys have shown that there is a mixed bag. Yes, there are about 50% of people who believe they have benefited, and rightly so. I mean, it's the right way that which you can access information. And of course, since so many people are on it, you would lose out if you were not on it, okay, which is really its selling point. But there's a large growing number of people. Currently, the statistics say about 30% of people, okay, and that's growing over the years, who actually believe that it has not benefited them. It has resulted for them in anxiety, it has resulted in sleep disorders, and it has resulted in other forms of bad outcomes which they do not at all like that it has happened to them. Okay. Now, a large reason, okay, for this is that somehow there is a compulsive form of being that happens when you get onto your smartphone. Okay? You are often pulled into continuous feeds. You are pulled into one form of messaging or the other. Okay? And therefore you end up spending a large part of your time, okay, in that, rather than spending that productive time in trying to build capacities that would help you over the long term. So it gives you an immediate type of happiness, but it doesn't necessarily, okay, lay the foundations for what could be the capabilities that help you over a longer future. I do not know how many of you are fond of films. I am, okay, and I was pretty excited, okay, that last week none other than Christopher Nolan was in India premiering his new film, The Odyssey. Okay? And along with him was Matt Damon, okay? And of course, who else? Holland, right? Okay. So The Odyssey has a very interesting story in it. Okay? I mean, there are many stories. Okay? But one of the stories is about two people. One is Echo, and the other is Narcissus. Okay? And Echo sort of falls in love with Narcissus, okay, and pursues him, but he is not interested. Okay? And if I were to write that story in today's form, and I would say that, Echo's friends on social media basically get together and they damn Narcissus, and they start to wish that hopefully, he will never see any friendships that he could ever develop being requited. Okay? So he would be always unhappy if he tried to have any deep friendships. And sure enough, that's what happens to Narcissus. Okay? He, finds himself isolated. He eventually gets totally self-absorbed and comes to believe, okay, that he is, in a sense, the best embodiment of humankind that can be, and therefore if he ever has to have a partnership with anyone, it can be with nobody else but himself. Okay? And that obviously is a futile outcome, because by definition a partnership is something with other beings and can never really be with yourself. Okay? So Odysseus' story, okay, is really one about how, if we are vain, if we are involved, okay, in just the immediate present, and we do not actually look at the broader compulsions of the world, we are not bothered about other people other than the small group of people we are interacting with maybe on our social media, okay, then life could actually end up in isolation and in vain. Okay. In a sense, we are immersed in a reflection, okay, that has a very dubious future. So it's an important story in the sense that it's telling us about some of the pitfalls, okay, that are possible if we restrict our world, okay, to just what is being fed to us, okay, to just what is in our immediate circle, and we are echo chambers of each other without looking at the broader concerns that affect many other people in the world as well as our society. Okay. Now there have been many surveys over the years, and most recent surveys tend to tell us, okay, that most of us are absorbed and spending a lot of our time in this type of activity. And what it has done is that our horizons have been shortened. Earlier, maybe every 10 minutes or so, people's attention flittered. Okay? They moved from one topic to another. Okay? But it wasn't a world earlier, okay, that provided too many stimuli. Okay? In today's world, you are bombarded, okay, with many stimuli. And it is up to you to actually know how to navigate those. The average person is hit with so many stimuli that your attention today changes every 45 seconds or so. Okay? Now that is something worth thinking about and reflecting on. Okay? If you are going to be diverted in your attention so frequently, it is going to be very difficult for you, okay, to focus on something which requires deep, hard concentration and which requires you to put in that effort that will actually build a foundation of knowledge which will stand you through the rest of your life. There's lots of data on this. Okay? I'm not just talking about layman's views. There's a famous study that is done every year called the PISA studies, okay, which is looking at student assessments across the world. It's a uniform data set which looks at these studies. And it has found that people's ability to understand, okay, novel ideas or to think through conventional ones has declined over the years. And this is not a post-COVID phenomenon. Too often in our world, we tend to focus on just what happened post-COVID. Okay? But this is something that started around the 2010s, okay, and is something that is affecting many of us, and especially Gen Z and those who come after them. Okay? There's also the World Future Study, which has been happening since 1980. And that study very interestingly tells us, again, that people report that it is even more difficult now to concentrate than earlier and to absorb new ideas. Okay? So the proportion of people who are reporting this has significantly increased, specifically in the last 15 years. Okay? And that is the time in which there has been an explosive growth in smartphones as well as in social media. The other challenge that you're going to actually have when you are on campus and through your life is obviously the challenge of AI. Okay? It is a two-edged sword. Okay? It does benefit, but it does have its own shortcomings. And you have to find ways to navigate it, okay, and to somehow go through this world, okay, by understanding what its limitations are. Okay. There is nothing that is perfect, and surely AI is the same. In the field of education, it has led us, okay, to the crux of a debate in which the argument is it helps. Why? Because it can give you personalized learning. Okay? It can help you to revise some of your studies. Okay? But at the same time, it can be a disbenefit if you rely too much on it. Okay. The debate in the field of education has been whether, and you will see that, tension arising in the classroom as well as outside in conversations. Okay. The debate has been whether the curriculum in educational institutions around the world should focus on skills or should focus on knowledge abundance. Should we ensure that our students, okay, have skills which make them immediately employment worthy, or should we give them the foundations of knowledge, okay, and presume that that is sufficient for skills to be built on those foundations? Okay. Now, if we were able to perfectly predict what's going to happen in the future, the answer to this question is quite clear. If I can predict what's going to happen tomorrow, then I should just give you skills. Right? I should not bother about the foundations of knowledge. Okay? But nobody in this world has been able to predict the future. Okay? Till a couple of years ago, everyone thought coding was the way to go forward. Okay? Coders today are the people who are losing their jobs. Okay? Every generation has this challenge of new forms of business and organization, and we are never sure, okay, what exactly is going to be the employment-worthy domain in the future. If that is the case, okay, then obviously the answer is that you should have a strong foundation in knowledge. Okay. Who would have thought 5 years ago, okay, that the head of WhatsApp would be not just an Indian, but somebody who's trained in philosophy? Okay, who takes a degree in philosophy? Okay. People would have thought that that's an impossibility. But today, that's exactly what's happened. Okay. Why? Because the critical skills and thinking, okay, that he was able to build, okay, is what actually makes that person valuable for the world of jobs and for the future. Okay. So we should be careful. Skills are important. Okay. In a sense, there is this old saying that you must walk on 2 legs. Okay. One leg should build the skills that you immediately need, that the current job market would actually want from you. But the other leg is that the world changes continuously. Okay. It was the famous philosopher Heraclitus who said, you can't step into the same river twice because the water has already flowed by. So on the other leg, make sure that you develop those foundations, okay, those important skills which are at the foundation of all knowledge, okay, which enable you to change as the world changes. And if you are on top of it, not just change as the world changes, but also be the change makers that make the world change. Okay? And it is this dream for you that I wish. Okay? That you focus on building the capacities for the future at the same time as you build the skills that you need in the present. It is for this reason that education is an investment. It is a building for the long term, okay? And it is not just something that you are in for a small phase of your life. Okay? You can only benefit from it over the entire life that you have if you have built those strong foundations for the future. Okay? So again, how do people use AI? We are fortunate that now some of the big AI companies have been sharing with us data on how university students use AI. Okay? So OpenAI and a few others have actually now come out with studies on this. Okay? And they find that students use it to do their homework, which is good. Okay. They use it to do practice sessions, also good. Okay. But then they find that students are also using it to summarize academic texts. Okay. So someone who's doing that is basically thinking, I'm not going to read these 10 pages or 12 pages that have been given to me. Okay. If it can be summarized and given to me in 3-4 bullet points, that's fine. Okay. But that's exactly the shortcut that short charges your future. Okay. As a result of that, okay, you may get by, you may be lucky, okay, you may get the grade, okay, but you haven't invested in actually, working through the arguments, working through what are the methods, and therefore imbibing a way of thinking that enables you to change when the world changes. Okay? And that is what we often call as cognitive offloading. Okay? So that means that you are not willing to do the little difficult step of working through the exact methods that a discipline would require you to do. Okay? And you've offloaded it to some digital platform which does that for you. And as a result, your ability to have critical thinking skills has been hugely diminished. People who use AI that way have been found to slowly not be very useful to the world of business or to the job market. Okay. So I would encourage you, okay, to be careful. Okay. You may use it to do your homework. You may use it, to solve some mathematical problem, okay, to implement, algorithms, okay, to basically check whether your coding is correct, to check if somehow the assignment you have written is fine, but all that should be after you have done the effort of doing it yourself. It should not do it for you, and that is what you present as your own work. If you make that mistake, your journey with us, okay, would not have been very helpful to you. Okay. So I don't want to sound like a doomsdayer, but I want our students to get the best that the world has to offer. And that's why at the very beginning of your journey with us, I want to make that clear, okay, that there is no substitute really for you other than grappling with the hard work that is involved in academics. And the payment is not now. The payment is when you manage to get through a life which is fulfilling and which actually allows you to get by without scrounging on day-to-day issues. We have got too fond of AI. Okay. And there is a term for it, which in fact a computer scientist himself had sort of invented. So chatbots are not a current phenomenon. They started somewhere in the 1960s, okay, years before you were born. And one of the first chatbots was possibly invented by a guy called Joseph Weizenbaum, okay, who wanted to use natural language processing to try and see if he could fool humans, okay, that when a chatbot was interacting with them, that humans actually thought that it was another human. Okay? And it was pretty good even in those times, okay? Maybe around 1965-66, what he invented. Okay? People who used it, okay, the chatbot that he had, found that when they were interacting, they were getting responses just like humans did. Okay? But Weizenbaum was wise. Okay? He said that, yes, It's just that I've been able to find a good predictive way of trying to string words together. But this chatbot does not understand the meaning of the sentences that it is conveying. Okay. It is able to give a response. Okay. And you may think that it has value, okay, but it is not in any way associated with any form of meaning. And this came to be called as the Eliza effect, okay, after a famous story, okay, in which actually, you think that what you're interacting is the real stuff, but actually it is not. I'm again reminded of the Odyssey. I don't know how many of you all are, but I'm looking forward for the movie's release this week. Okay? And in the Odyssey, I don't know if Chris Nolan has this story. Okay? The Odyssey is full of stories. Okay? But one story is of Pygmalion. If you've heard of Pygmalion, he was a sculptor. Okay? And he wanted to perfect his craft. So he made a statue. And he found the statue so perfect, even more perfect than human beings, that he fell in love with it. And he just could not interact any longer with human beings. Okay? He'd found, in a sense, the fountain, he thought, of knowledge. Okay? But obviously, statues can't love you back, right? And that's exactly, what is the problem with AI. It's like a Pygmalion effect. Okay? If you are vain enough to think that your invention, okay, is the be-all and end-all, okay, of living, okay, you have not understood the limitations of human creativity. Okay? Recently, Sam Altman, okay, who is the CEO of OpenAI, okay, was praising AI just like for its invention. He took it to a literature class, okay, and he basically asked it, why don't you write an essay on grief, okay, in a genre of literature which is known as metafiction, which is very difficult for people to write in. Okay? And AI came up, of course, with an essay. And he praised it, saying that this is really the pinnacle of human achievement. Okay? He was forgetting, okay, that AI is very good at imitation. If there are people who are doing metafiction, AI is able to pick up the strands of that and replicate it with a few changes. That is not intelligence. Okay? That is just sheer imitation. Okay? So don't believe the hard sell that some of these new forms of trying to make you live are pushing very hard for you to imbibe and to live with. I'm not going to deny that they are important. As I said earlier, use these tools, but be careful about how it may impact your future. So let me end with some wishes for you. Okay? I believe that apart from you imbibing knowledge, the idea of a university is for you to build character. Okay? And you build character, okay, for yourself. In fact, character is what you will find gives you the biggest reputation, okay, and builds your career even more than maybe the certificate that you will get at the end of the program. Okay? To build character, you must have a sense of purpose. Okay? You must try and use these years to find an objective for yourself, find a niche, find out who you are. Okay? And that means what in the world of knowledge we call as metacognition. Okay? Think of your biases. all the time. Keep questioning yourself. Okay? Is this way that I think of myself and I want to present myself to my friends and others, the me that I want to actually live with for the rest of my life? All of us have biases and prejudices. Even today, I do, and many people do. Okay? But the idea is to constantly press yourself to understand what those biases are, okay? So that you are able to interact with people meaningfully. And a lot of today's world is about interaction. Social media is nothing other than a reflection of that. The more you're able to work in teams, the more you're able to interact well, communicate well, the better your future would be. Finally, think of not just what is good for yourself, but what service orientation you can have. Okay? What good are you, not just to yourself, but to your family? And not just to your family, also to the world around you. Okay? If you have a purpose which is more than your own self, if you have this dedication to a service, to humanity, it will give you the most fulfillment that you could ever dream of, okay, than any other gift that may be, available to you in this world. So a university is a place for tenacity, it's a place for hard work, okay? It's a place for fun. Enjoy yourselves. Okay? There will be lots in the student clubs. There will be much that you would do, chit-chat in the canteens and in various other places. All that is a learning experience. Okay? As I said in the beginning, knowledge is not just what happens in the classroom. Okay? And I hope you enjoy most of that. Okay? Above all, take ownership for whatever decisions you take. Okay? Whatever you do, you have to own it. Because only if you own it, do you have a right to make that decision. Okay? Otherwise, if you do not have a sense of purpose and you do not take ownership of your decisions, you can be sure someone else is going to make decisions for you, and that's not a world that is worthy of yourself as a human being who has gone through a university and understood the basis of life and living. So welcome to GITAM University. I wish you all the best and look forward to interacting with each of one of you across the campuses in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Your words are truly inspiring and encouraging, and thank you so much for the warm wishes. We now invite our esteemed Professor Arun Kumar, sir, the Dean of Department of CSE, to share their thoughts and welcome our students. A huge round of applause, please.
Yes, so firstly, welcome to GITAM University. I see a few parents also probably around here. Yeah. A warm welcome to all of you. I think the Vice Chancellor has pretty much made it clear what the purpose of education is. I might want to add just a few footnotes and a few maybe explanatory ideas about how education, at least in the engineering and sciences, that includes computer science and engineering and artificial intelligence, works on. So, So let's begin with one important thing that you need to think carefully about over the next 4 years. So various words are bandied around, and often they are fuzzy, and they have gray demarcations. So the 4 most important words in the case of education that I would like to talk about are probably these 4 words: knowledge, information, understanding, and wisdom. And I think all these 4 words are being bandied around. And one of the reasons why now philosophers have come in to this whole business of AI and the human endeavor is mainly because of the fact that very few people really understand the lines of demarcation that separate information from knowledge and understanding, and lastly wisdom, which is actually some kind of culmination of knowledge along with an experience in the universe that we inhabit. Yeah? Okay, but let's not talk too much about wisdom, because you're still all mostly very young, and wisdom comes with age and a combination of knowledge and understanding. So, but let's talk about knowledge and understanding. So when you look at something like Wikipedia, so what it contains actually is just information. So most of what you get by a search, through a search engine or through Wikipedia, is mostly information. What you need to do often, so that information is scattered and unstructured in various ways, and what you need to do is to basically maintain some kind of a structure and understanding of that knowledge. Very often understanding means understanding the causes and the effects, the mechanisms, especially in the case of engineering and sciences, the mechanisms that go into explaining certain phenomena as consequences of certain other phenomena, right? And for a large part, your web resources will only give you information. Wikipedia is slightly better. It also tries to provide explanations. But the explanations do not mean that if you read them, you will understand them necessarily. And the only way to understand them really is to actually work them out. So people keep talking about, why should I reinvent the wheel? But a major part of understanding what that information conveys is actually reworking the entire process. And that is something that we would like you to absorb as part of the educational process. So and then once you have a deeper understanding of exactly these phenomena, it is possible for you then to apply your understanding, maybe to create something new, right? So that brings in a new notion of, besides these 4 words, that of creativity. The question of who is more creative, and there are large numbers of studies on creativity have been done, but the jury is still out on what exactly constitutes creativity. A lot of creativity has to do with your intuition. Now that's another word, right? Where does intuition come from? Where does it come from through cognition? And all these words are going to confuse you a lot. But the point is that my own experience is that a large amount of intuition actually comes fairly randomly and unexpectedly. A large amount of creativity, therefore, follows intuition, should follow intuition, because that's the only way it can be justified. And that follows the same random process as intuition. and it's not very well understood. What is understood are the processes of explanations of causes and effects that you can get through your education, right? So that's the point. So don't, at your stage in life, don't be afraid to recreate what somebody else has already done, because that is what will provide you with a deeper understanding of that piece of information that you garnered from somewhere. That's the only way. It will also open up possibilities. A deep understanding of that will also open up the possibilities for moving in a direction different from whatever other people have thought about. Your own intuition and creativity could lead you into a different direction. And therefore, as Einstein once said, most people say why. I say why not? And that, the understanding, the critical understanding, the critical thinking that is required for understanding a phenomenon, understanding a process, and how certain pieces of information have come to be garnered as end conclusions, but they're all end conclusions to some process of reasoning, through some process of understanding. And very often, in most of the sciences and the physical sciences and engineering, the only tool you really have to aid and to have a rigorous understanding of phenomena is the language of mathematics. My own observation here is that all of physics, chemistry, engineering, computer science would rely on mathematics, mainly because mathematics is actually the only language of communication we have which is precise, concise, and unambiguous. So I would entreat you all not to forget your mathematics and to in fact question, if possible, for first causes and root causes through the language of mathematics. And that should hold for all branches of engineering, the sciences, and actually computer science and engineering and AI too, right? So there are a couple of other things that Professor D'Souza mentioned. One was that of ELIZA, so Pygmalion. So the statue that Pygmalion constructed, what he sculpted, was a female called Galatea. And he fell so much in love with Galatea that he lost himself and all his social moorings. Right. The name Eliza comes from George Bernard Shaw's famous play called Pygmalion, in which there is this flower girl called Eliza Doolittle, who is trained in language, in English speech, by a professor of linguistics, right, called Higgins. And that was made into a famous movie in the 1950s called My Fair Lady. Is anybody familiar with that? No. Okay, you can find it on YouTube, My Fair Lady. It's a beautiful film starring Audrey Hepburn and Rex Harrison. And it is based on George Bernard Shaw's play called Pygmalion, right? And that in turn was inspired by the story of Pygmalion and Galatea. Right, so Weizenbaum created, well, actually the VC has said it's a chatbot. At that time, there weren't these fancy graphical user interfaces, but it was essentially a conversation so ELIZA is just a name of a program that Weizenbaum wrote to just piece together words so that you get grammatically correct English words and it appears as if you're actually conversing with somebody who is typing it out, some human being who is typing it out. And most often in the ELIZA program, so the ELIZA was just a name of a program that Weizenbaum gave, and that program was just written in Fortran or one of those old languages in the 1960s, and all it did was the user could make a query, and it would take those words in the query, some keywords, nouns, subject, predicate, and it would coin back either another counter query or it would try to give an answer. But they were just blank sentences. And as he mentioned, none of it was meaningful in any deeper sense. Eliza was just being a grammatically correct reconstruction of sentences available from its vocabulary and from the query that was posed to it. Yeah? So it had no understanding whatsoever. Right? I would like to caution you, especially when you use AI tools, when you, for example, use nowadays, every search engine comes with an AI summary, right? I mean, first, before it actually gives you the search results. Sometimes it says thinking. Don't believe it. It's lying. What it is actually doing is it is searching through its own database of all the information that it has digested from the web and trying to come out with a suitable reply extracted from that. So it's pure information retrieval, reconstructed into grammatically correct sentences. So most of the time when an AI system tells you that it's thinking, it's actually only doing a search. That's one thing. Despite the various claims, it's not clear that AI systems can actually create. So the notion of creativity, they fall since their notion of understanding itself is tenuous, there's very little understanding. The notion of creativity is far from understanding anyway. So they do not actually create. What they do is they retrieve from already available information. What they can do is some small amount of inferencing through the information retrieval, through keywords and key phrases. But they are far from being creative. What they can do sometimes in the case of, let's say, some of the mathematical problems that many of the AI systems have been shown to solve, which have eluded human solutions, is the fact that they are able to combine a large number of solutions which are beyond the human capacity and try to retrieve information from all of them quick enough to come up with possibly a new solution. That is something AI systems will do. As far as using AI for your homework and so on, please remember that most of the solutions you get are solutions that have already of people who have already documented on the web solutions to problems that you have been given. So you're not getting anything new out of it, firstly. Secondly, when it comes to programming, in your initial programming classes, please do not submit those. All those solutions are likely correct because you're anyway rediscovering what other people have discovered before and documented, right? So the point is that you're only fooling yourself by offloading your cognition, your understanding to an AI system, which anyway doesn't understand but just retrieves information from the web, right? So please do not engage in that, because ultimately when it comes to programming, you have to be able to solve a problem in the form that has been posed to you. And it's not that, so those problems may never be unique. They're not so unique. Other people have posed the same problems. Other people have also solved the same problems. And what your AI system will do is to take out the best solution and hand it to you in a platter. So you're offloading both your understanding, you're offloading your creativity, you're offloading the effort of even trying to understand to an AI system, and what consequences it has to your long-term growth is that it leads to what has been known as brain rot. Yeah? So if you keep on offloading your thinking processes to an AI system to retrieve stuff that has already been done by others, you have completely lost the ability to think for yourself and for others. So that's why, even in the case of programming assignments and so on and so forth, I would say that you should first try it out yourself, as Professor D'Souza has told you. It is, and do not submit AI stuff, what AI has generated, as your own. That is ethically unacceptable, right? Please, so keep these things in mind. Use use the search engines and the AI systems. Remember that the AI systems are just a step away from search engines. I mean, they're a step higher in the hierarchy than the search engines. And so you can use them to garner information, but the understanding needs to be of your own. And it's understanding of that information is what gives you knowledge. Wisdom comes from experience when you combine that knowledge with application, right? So please ensure that you do not go the Eliza way. It is very easy to get marks for assignments by submitting AI-generated work, because a lot of it is of very good quality, very high quality and very efficient, and has been known to be correct. But that will only go so far as to aid in your brain rot. I mean, so that, just think upon all the problems as little puzzles and challenges that aid you in your thinking process and in the ability to solve. Use the mathematics that you already learned. A large amount of whatever you're going to learn is going to be mathematical. Do not postpone the mathematics. The mathematics is often whatever you've learned in school. I mean, just use it. Don't forget it, right? I would entreat you to use that mathematics for understanding. Use that mathematics to derive new facts. Use that mathematics to come up with new theorems. Use that mathematics, having come up with new theorems and justifications for their theorems, use them to come up with new algorithms. Use those algorithms and code. The word coding is a greatly over-abused word. It is not the same as programming. It is not the same as program development. It's only the last step in converting a piece of mathematics into an algorithm, and then the algorithm into the syntax of a language, which can be, and that's a program which can be compiled and executed, right? So remember that in the short run, you might still get your 9.6, 9.7 CGPA by just dishonestly peddling AI-generated stuff as your own. And your teachers may not even be able to detect it. But that's unethical, and it goes against the principle of whether you want education for your livelihood, or education for your life, or education just to get a temporary employment. You will all be challenged with that. So develop your skills. As you said, you have to walk on two legs, so you have to develop the skills too. But that does not mean that you allow your brain to rot by simply taking recourse to all this, the tools that are already available. Learn to use the tools wisely, but do not fall a slave to them. Yeah? With that, I will welcome you all with this cautionary tale. There's a lot of stuff, as I said, it's not clear what part. Your teachers will also be using AI. You will also probably be using AI. But in your initial programming courses, you should be thinking originally. Later in your capstone project, well, you could use AI, you could use libraries, you could use other tools available and prepare yourself for employment in industry. That's okay. But in the learning process, just like in your primary school, you still had to learn multiplication and division the hard way. The use of calculators came later. You could use calculators later in life, but not in your primary education. It's exactly the same as far as the use of mathematics and tools are concerned in today's world of engineering education. And I would entreat you not to misuse and abuse the trust that teachers place on you for some original thinking and creativity. Right? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for those encouraging and inspiring words. Now, before we move on to the next session, I would like to take